Hey guys, this is John. So, one of the perks of being the co founder of Chessable is that I get to review repertoires before anybody else. And recently, we had an international master submit a repertoire for sale. And that international master is Levon Altounian, this fine fellow pictured here. And the repertoire he submitted is I Am Levon Altounian, 1E4 Explained. And since Levon is a titled player, and in my opinion did a great job with this repertoire, I just wanted to give him a little publicity and also give you some information about this repertoire so you can decide if it's something you might be willing to purchase. So, as the title may suggest, this is a repertoire for white based on 1E4. Levon is selling it for $9.99. And this repertoire is written with beginners in mind, but I think everyone, even higher rated players, can get something out of this. And the recommendations that Levon gives are pretty intriguing. And I'm going to profile one line that I was kind of surprised by and that I'm even thinking of playing myself. So this repertoire is 136 variations long. 100 of those variations are the official recommendations of Levon's, and 36 of those are informational lines. Informational lines can be things that he wanted to include in the repertoire, but are not the specific recommendations. For instance, he may propose alternate systems at times. He does this in the section on the Sicilian defense. He proposes both the C3 Sicilian, but also gives the Grand Prix attack as a backup in case you want to mix and match. And this repertoire has 6,500 words of instruction, which is important to note because anytime you're looking to purchase some chess resource, be it a book, a DVD, a Chessable repertoire, you want to know how well the author is fleshing out those lines. And 6,500 words of instruction across 136 lines is a pretty decent ratio, in my opinion. And Levon does a great job of explaining plans and ideas along the way. So let's click into this repertoire. It's organized in 9 chapters, starting with the intro. The 2 meatiest chapters, so the ones that have the most lines, are the double king pawn section and the Sicilian defense section, which should come as no surprise because if you're playing e4 as white, you're going to be facing those two options the most. So in the double king pawn, he recommends the Scotch for white, gives some gambit lines there that are a lot of fun. And as I said, in the Sicilian, he gives both the C3 Sicilian and the Grand Prix attack. I wanted to highlight one recommendation he has against the Caro-Kann defense. And you guys know I'm not a big e4 player. I used to play e4 way back when. I've kind of shifted away from it, but have been trying to play it a little bit more recently. And this line that Levon proposes against the Caro is really cool, and I'd like to try it on someone at some point. So let me click into the relevant variation here. So if we're looking on the white side of the Caro-Kann, black playing c6 on move 1, characterizing the Caro-Kann, he recommends knight f3 on move 2. Most players play d4 and just occupy the center with both of the pawns, but he has a specific idea in mind with knight f3. So black plays d5, we trade the pawns. Now here's where it gets interesting. So Levon says, play knight e5 in this position. And he acknowledges that this move breaks traditional principles of the opening because you are moving the knight twice, but there's some really cool ideas behind that. And incidentally, this variation is called the Apocalypse variation, according to Levon. I know nothing about this, so I'm just going by what he says here. But I like that name because if you're going to play something that kind of breaks a rule in the opening, you want it to have an intimidating name. So your opponents might be even more confused by that. Not that they would really know the name at the time they're facing it, but you never know. But suffice it to say, Apocalypse variation sounds pretty cool. So knight e5, and after knight f6, Levon outlines the plans that white has at his disposal. And I won't read this verbatim, but you can see that one plan is to play bishop b5 check, whether as a pin or otherwise. Another plan might be to harass black's light square bishop. Often in the Caro-Kann, black is looking to liberate that bishop. So there is one line he gives where the bishop ends up on f5, and you try to hit it with an early g4 thrust. And the third plan is the one we're going to see here. He calls it kind of a safety net plan, where if white is not achieving much from those first 2 ideas, white can simply castle and hopefully launch an attack against black's king. So in this variation, after d4, black plays a6, trying to cover the b5 square. White proceeds with knight c3, e6, bishop d3, bishop e7, white castles, and black plays knight bd7, so trying to challenge the knight on e5. And now white plays f4, supporting the knight. If you've watched my videos, you know that I'm often warning against using the f-pawn too early in the game. What do I always say, guys? The f-pawn stands for forget about it. But there are cases where moving the f-pawn early can be a good idea. And here, since white's position is otherwise good, he has decent development, he's castled, I think it is acceptable to use the f-pawn to prop up that knight on e5. And if black were to take on e5, you bet that white would be planning to take back with the f-pawn in order to open the f-file. So f4 is a nice pawn push, which is, I think, a cornerstone of the apocalypse variation. So black castles in this line, and now white gets to have some fun. So rook f3, lifting the rook to the third rank. And this is a clear signal that white is trying to swing the rook over to h3 and launch an attack against black's king. And this line, I think, illustrates kind of a common flaw with players who not necessarily play the Caro-Kann, but when encountering a new variation in your main opening, you might kind of curl up in a ball and try to defend, play a little bit more passively than normal. And you can see that black's arrangement is logical, but not very active. And rook f3 is already highlighting the fact that black is subject to come under attack if they play too carefully. So after rook f3, queen c7, white brings the rook over to h3 as planned. Now black might be thinking, how do I get this light square bishop out? So if black were to play knight b6, white now has a nice chance to end the game immediately. And if you haven't seen the answer already, feel free to pause your video and try to find that. So white to move and win. All right, so the move is bishop takes h7, rip that pawn off the board. King h8 is clearly bad. So knight takes h7, but now queen h5. And white's queen joins the attack down the h-file, combined with the rook on h3, and black is going to be swiftly mated. So if knight f6, queen h8 checkmate. Now, we can never suggest that your games are going to go as easily as this, but this shows kind of a model way of playing in this particular line and highlights one of the big pluses of this variation, I think, which is that routine play by black can lead to some disasters like that. And a lot of people will play kind of passively upon first encountering a move like this. And he gives you backup options too, referring to those other possible plans. If black, allows a pin from the bishop or tries to play bishop f5, he's got you covered there. So this is quite typical for what Levon talks about in this repertoire. I noticed that he often does not give like absolute mainline suggestions. He chooses lines which are very practical and easier for beginning players and mid-range players to play. So if you're a beginner looking to incorporate e4 into your repertoire as white, I think this is an excellent repertoire for you. It's $9.99. It's not a ton of money, so feel free to check it out. And even if you're more experienced, you might consider buying this repertoire as well for the sake of some of the recommendations that Levon makes. So let me know if you have any questions about this. Levon may also be in the comments to this YouTube video and, of course, on the repertoire as well. And also, if you haven't signed up for Chessable, I would highly encourage you to make an account, chessable.com. There's lots of free resources there. I put up repertoires myself, including one on the Scandinavian, also a D4 repertoire for white. So cruise on over and check those out. And I hope you guys are liking the site. And I'll be back again soon with more videos. All right, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.